Well, good morning, church family. It's good to be with you, to worship alongside you this morning. For just a moment, I want you to consider something. What image of God do you have? If I were to ask you just for a second, whether just to construct this mental image or to perhaps draw this image in your mind's eye of God, what would that look like? What comes to your mind when I ask that question? How do you view God? What is your picture of Him? I imagine for many it would look something like this. It would look like maybe a throne room scene with the God high above creation. Maybe it would look like a picture of just a being with just glory and majesty and honor and splendor, like we sung about this morning, the first song that Dylan led us in, Majesty. Maybe it would be an image like that. Or I imagine some would have this image, an image of this just God holding the universe together, sustaining the universe, holding it, providing for it, caring and tending to it on this macro level high above creation. This is an image that I believe many would have of God. It's certainly an image that comes to my mind just instantaneously, this God, this ruler, this figure of authority standing above creation with glory, majesty, and honor. And the question that I just want us to consider this morning, if this is your view of God, if this is what instantly comes to your mind, if this is what you think of instantaneously when I ask you that question, just to construct, no matter how hard and difficult that is, that image of God in your mind's eye, I want to ask you the question, is something vital missing from this picture? Is something vital missing from this way in which we view God? His nature, His character, His action, His very being. Is something missing? Here's what we're going to argue this morning. I think there's a lot of Christians with a narrow view of God that just needs a little bit of expanding. While the image that we talked about is not wrong, church family, I don't want to insinuate that at all this morning. God is a God who stands above creation. I think about Isaiah 66 verse 1. This is what the Lord says, "Heaven is my throne and earth is my footstool." God sits on a throne above creation. That's not wrong. That's biblically accurate. Or I think about Nehemiah chapter 9, verse 6, where it says, "You alone are the Lord, you made the heavens, even the highest heavens, and all of their starry host, the earth and all that's in it, the seas and all that's in them. You give life to everything, and the multitudes of heaven worship you." It's that image of a God holding creation together, and a God being worshipped in heaven. I think about 1 Chronicles 29, verse 11, where it says, "Yours, O Lord, is the greatness and the power and the glory, the victory and the majesty." This image of just praise and glory being bestowed on the Father above creation. And that image that many just instantaneously have of God is not wrong. But if that's all your image is of God, what I'm going to argue this morning is it's still not quite right. Even though these things are biblically true, even though these things are biblically accurate, that God is mighty, God is powerful, God is authoritative, God stands above creation, if that's all you think of God, well then your image, I think, needs a little bit expanding and just a little bit of work. And why do I say that? And why take the time to talk about God this morning? To show that He is more than just a God who sits on a throne, but He's a God mindful of creation. A sermon where we're going to devote time to talking about how He doesn't just hold the universe together, but He holds my life together. And He knows me by name and works on my behalf and hears my cry when I need Him. A sermon where we're going to talk about how God is not just glorious and just majestic and far above creation, but He's also working and holding my hand, just lowly me here on earth. Why are we going to talk about that this morning and showcase God and who He is, not just this sovereign, authoritative being, but also this mindful, caring Father? Why are we going to do that this morning? This is not going to be like the most memorable sermon. I'm just going to lay that out for you here at the outset of this lesson. This is not going to be probably my best lesson. This is not going to be the one that you probably walk away with thinking this is just, man, this is the best stuff ever. But we really do need to talk about this, don't we? We need to devote time to showcasing who God is and expanding our picture of him, because the case that I'm going to make this morning is when we have a narrow image of God, we have a narrow image of God and just view him like this on the screen, that's going to lead to a whole lot of problems in our life. Problems that you may not even realize are happening as you have viewed God this way, and I think there are many brethren that do. We know this to be true on the flip side of things, right? We know many in the world who hold a very narrow image of God, absence of these things, and focus on the nearness, the counselor nature of God, the father nature of God. And we see the problems with that, don't we? When they remove all of these things from God and they define God in this very narrow way and see him just as their friend and their buddy and their father and their just personal counselor, yeah, it leads to a whole lot of problems, doesn't it? There's negative consequences when you see God narrowly. It leads to, and we see this in the world, this lack of reverence for God, this lack of being subject to his authority, this lack of putting God on the throne and then putting me on the throne instead of him. We see this in the world, don't we, when they have an incorrect view of God. But what I think we need to spend some more time on, and I think sadly many haven't spent time on the last few years, is maybe we need some help too with our image. I think we have the authority thing down, church family. I think we see God as that authoritative figure in heaven. We do a great job with that at this church family, talking about God's sovereignty, his rule, his glory over creation. But I can't help but wonder how many disciples of King Jesus and how often I have in my life just seen God so narrowly. And just like it does with the imbalance outside in the world where they rob God of these things, there's obvious consequences that come from this. When we view God just narrowly as this ruler in heaven and not much more. We're going to see it leads to an absence of peace. We'll talk about that today. At best case, peace is fragile in this life when I don't see this nearness and this care and this personal love the Father has for me. We're going to talk about today how it leads to some consequences with holiness. How when I just put God millions of miles away in a throne on heaven and not here with me in this world, watching me and listening to me, yeah, that's going to affect my holiness. Like, I'm just going to feel like I can do whatever I want to do, and it's just going to go unnoticed by the God in heaven because, again, he's a million miles away on the throne. Church family, when we have a narrow view of God, no matter what side of the imbalance you fall on, whether you just see him as a friend or you just see him as a king, when your view is imbalanced of God and it robs him of certain things, it's going to lead to a whole lot of problems for us. Because God wants us and desires us to see him completely. And for that reason, while we certainly devote a lot of time to talking about the imbalance in the world, this morning I just wanted to devote a lesson to talking the imbalance that maybe a few of us have that might be leading to a whole lot of problems in your life. And hopefully this will be a lesson that helps alleviate those things, fixes some things, and at the very least just comforts you to see God in the beauty of him. This will not be a sermon. I don't want to insinuate, I don't want to insinuate things that are wrong and leave you with confusion. This is not a sermon where we're going to diminish his majesty and diminish his authority and exalt his love. We're not going to do that. Or vice versa, where we're going to diminish his love and his nearness and his comfort and exalt his majesty and glory. What we are doing here today is very, very simple. We are seeing God for who he is, exalting everything, seeing it with clarity, seeing it with devotion and attention, and appreciating it with equal gratitude and balance. Because when we do that, when we see the God of the Bible and not merely a God that I construct in my mind, it's going to lead to a whole lot of good in life. And so like I said, I don't know how this sermon's going to work out. I don't know if it's going to be the most memorable. I hope it's good. I worked really hard on it. But at the very least, I hope today can be a day where you leave this church building. If you are someone with a narrow view of God, if you're someone who has kind of robbed God of his nearness, his care, his attention to you as an individual, I pray that you just leave here with so much comfort this morning, seeing the God of the Bible, the God who is watching us now, who is with us now, who is listening to us now, who is working on our behalf right now. That's the God I want to show you this morning. And so let me just bring four things to your attention this morning. If you have a narrow view of God, I just want to leave four things at your feet that I pray will comfort you and bless you this morning. The first thing is this: to those with a narrow image of God, I want to remind you this: God knows me from heaven. Hey, this morning, if you have defined God narrowly, if you see him just as this majestic being far above creation, I just want to remind you this morning that God knows you personally, right? Like we have for lack of a better term, we have a king, we have a president in Washington. I know that term's just controversial right now. Sorry about that. But we have a president in Washington, D.C., a ruler over us who works on our behalf, and he is someone who, while working on our behalf, doesn't quite know us, does he? Right? Like he knows us kind of categorically, maybe where we fall in the socioeconomic standing, maybe our political ideologies or whatever it might be, white collar, blue collar. But at the end of the day, the presidents of the United States, they don't really know us personally, do they? They don't really know us by name. And I can't help but how many people, how many disciples of King Jesus take this Western image of a king, this thing that we're very familiar with, and it's always been the case of all of human history, and they apply it to God. As they read about his sovereignty and his rule over creation, they rob God of this personal nature, this personal attention, and they deem God to be like the kings in Washington or the presidents in Washington, this God who just kind of rules the nations generally, who maybe knows the best of the best or the worst of the worst, who knows maybe them by number or by righteous or wicked, just or unjust, but a God who doesn't know them personally. And what I want to say to you this morning, and we'll get into the text right here, right now, is this is how you view God. I want you to know that this is not the God of the Bible, and this is not who God is. I don't think there's anyone who would come out and say that's how they view God, but I certainly see it in dispositions and actions, don't you? I don't think there's anyone who would come out and say, I view God as I view the president in Washington, D.C., but I see it in the walks of disciples every single day. I see it when they don't have peace in their life, when they don't feel known and valuable into the world. I see it in this constant pursuit of so many disciples of King Jesus to amass status and influence and friends, to be known by the world. I see it in so many, in this epidemic we have in the church of depression and loneliness. I think, church family, there's a lot of people experiencing heartache and difficulty because whether they know it or not, they view God the way they view the president or any earthly leader throughout human history. Church family, this is not the case in the Bible. I think about what we find in the Bible where it says in Psalm 139, where it says, "You have searched me, Lord, and you know me. You know when I sit and when I rise. You perceive my thoughts from afar. You discern my going out and my lying down. You are familiar with all my ways. Before a word is on my tongue, Lord, you know it completely." I think about Jeremiah 1, verse 5. Jeremiah 1, verse 5, where it says this, "The word of the Lord came to me, saying, before I formed you in the womb, I knew you. Before you were born, I set you apart. I appointed you as a prophet to the nations." What does the Lord want us to know this morning, church family? And what is the better image of God for us to have? A God who, yes, is majestic. A God who, yes, is mighty. A God who, yes, is sitting on his throne in heaven, but also a God who knows me by name. Where I'm not just a number in creation, where I'm not just a category, unrighteous and righteous, where I'm not just a creation that he loves and he tends to just in this general sense, but a better image of God for all of us to appreciate this morning that we're just going to build on as we go throughout this sermon is a God who knows me by name. Where we are not just creation, but we are handiwork, beloved children of God. Where yes, he is a king, but yes, he is also this father that knows the names of his children one by one by one. He knows me and he knows you. Like I said, we're going to build on this in just a second, but doesn't that just already change the way you see God? If maybe you walked in with a little bit of a narrow view this morning, doesn't it change the way you view that throne room in heaven and the God who sits there? A God who is not just ruling, and a God who's just not authoritative, A God who just is working on behalf of all of us, all Christians, but a God who knows me. Doesn't that change that image, again, of just heaven and maybe what you've defined it to look like and you've defined what our God looks like? He's a God who knows you. And building on from that, can I also say to those with this narrow view of God that He's a million miles away and He's just some king who's holding the universe together, can I also say that God hears me from heaven? That God hears me from heaven. God doesn't just know me by name, which is just amazing and cool to think about, that I have a tension from the Father on an individual level. But also, can I say this, God hears me from heaven. I remember when I was a little kid, speaking of presidents, I remember when I was a little kid, I was about 9 years old. I wrote to President Obama in the White House. And I wrote to him because I wanted to become the 57th president of the United States one day. And so I said, hey, can you give me some advice? Can you maybe help my public speaking a little bit? Like tell me some things. And to my shock and amazement, like 3 weeks later, opened up the mailbox and there was a letter from the White House. Like, coolest day of my life. But as I got older, I realized that President Obama never read that letter, right? Even though it was signed by him, even though it said it was from him, I recognize now when I'm a little bit older that he never saw that letter. But it was his aides and his staff members and probably some automation software that pumps all of those things out and send them across the world. And why do I recognize that President Obama never saw that letter? It's because he's really busy. Like, he is way too busy to read all these thousands of letters each day, way too busy to give advice to every single child that's asking, way too busy to answer all the requests of people asking. He's too busy fulfilling the office of president. As I got older, I recognized that even though I wrote to him, even though I called out to him, he never saw it because he was too busy ruling. And church family, again, I can't help but wonder how many people, whether they know it or not, have this image of God, this view of God. This view that God doesn't hear my prayers, or a view that God doesn't really want to listen to me jabber on about my work drama while He's literally solving the problems of the world and stopping wars. There's no way that God would listen to me as He's sustaining the president, or sustaining the planet, there we go, and accomplishing His will. There's no that He would ever want to listen to me while He's all the way up there and I'm just down here as a lowly creation. Or maybe we have this Western idea of prayer where God is just kind of delegating that to the angels. They're taking care of it, but never the God on the throne hears or listens to me. And again, I don't think anybody would just come out and say that. I don't think even many people recognize that, have that view of God. But church family, I think there's a lot of people that do, sadly. And again, I see it in disposition, and I see it in action. I think people obviously have that view of God when they aren't praying to Him like they should, when they aren't communicating with Him on a regular basis, when they aren't sharing their worries, when they aren't talking with Him daily. It's evident when they feel alone and scared and not at peace as they're going through difficult hardship. It's evident when they bow their head but doubt, unsure that their words are truly heard and appreciated by God. And so to anyone who walked in with a narrow view this morning, can I just say something really amazing? And hopefully something that just changes this image of God that maybe you have. God hears you. He hears you. I love what the Bible promises. The Bible promises that we are always heard by God. I love this. The thing about Psalm 116, verse 1 and 2. I love the Lord, for He heard my voice. He heard my cry for mercy. Because He turned His ear to me, I will call on Him as long as I live. I think about 1 John 5, verse 14. And this is confidence that we have towards Him, that we ask anything according to His will, He hears us. Psalm 18, verse 6, in my distress I called upon the Lord. To my God I cried for help. From His temple He heard my voice, and my cry to Him reached His ears. Church family, what's a better image of God? An image that is going to change your life, as we're going to talk about at the end of this sermon in the application section. What is a better image of God? Yes, majestic. Yes, holy. Yes, sitting above creation and ruling and sustaining. But also just think about, it's an image of a God who, just to use some modern vernacular, is a God who has his ear pressed up against the phone, who's constantly waiting for me to talk through it. That's who our God is. A God who is devoted to sustaining and protecting and nourishing creation and ruling and judging, but also a God who at every moment is devoted to hearing me. Think about that for just a second. That's the God of the Bible. A God who is, yes, a million miles above creation, but also a God who is looking intently at creation below. A God who is waiting to hear, a God who is waiting to ultimately respond. Just think of that image. I love that image. That image of a God on his throne listening to us. Can I also say along those lines that to anyone who walked in with a narrow view of God this morning, can I also just say God sees me? And again, these are things that I think we all know to be true. I'm not surprising anyone in this lesson this morning. But again, I think these are things that we allowed to be overshadowed by God's authority and majesty and glory and him being the creator. We have to see the complete picture this morning. God is a God who sees me. I wonder how many, like with the last point, don't paint God as a God who sees them at all times. I wonder how many let God's majesty and dominion outshine his steadfast gaze on his people. And again, I don't think anyone would just admit this. I don't think anyone would just come out and say, yeah, God doesn't see me. I don't think that at all. I don't think there's anyone who would just say that. But church family, again, I see it in disposition, in action. I see it in people sinning without concern, thinking their sins are secret when they are, in fact, not secret at all because there is a God in that moment looking at them. It's seen in loneliness, in depression, and anxiety. Our most fundamental needs as a human is to be seen, and many feel like they aren't seen at all. It's seen in many having this just ongoing and endless pursuit to be seen and appreciated by men, and for that reason doing good works. And can I just say, if those are the consequences you are feeling in your life from an incorrect view of God, can I just say this morning, he sees you. That's pretty special, isn't it? God sees me. There is never a moment where I find myself without the gaze of God devoted to me as an individual. We see that in places like 1 Peter chapter 3, verse 12. For the eyes of the Lord are on the righteous, and his ears are open to their prayer, but the face of the Lord is against those who do evil. Psalm 34, verse 15. The eyes of the Lord are toward the righteous, and his ears toward their cry. Proverbs 15, verse 3. The eyes of the Lord are in every place, keeping watch on the evil and the good. What is the image of the throne room? Again, I just want to change your image this morning. It's not just an image where God knows me by name. It's not just an image where God has his ear pressed against the phone waiting for us to speak through it, but it's also an image where God has his eyes fixed on us below. Every second, every moment, every day. In love for his creation, as Peter pointed out in 1 Peter chapter 3, verse 12. For the eyes of the Lord are on the righteous. It's an image, yes, of a king and a Lord and Jehovah God above creation, but a better image is taking those things and amplifying them through the lens also of a father watching over his children, ensuring that they are never alone or unprotected. Can I also say this, that God is with me on earth? And can I also just say that the image that we should have of God is not just one where he knows me, not just one where he hears me, not one just where he sees me as an individual, but also where he walks beside me on earth. And you see that all over the Bible, don't you? When you actually take time to appreciate and read the Bible, what does God want to make absolutely clear? That he is a God who walks alongside his people. That there is never a moment where they find themselves alone. I think about the famous passage, Psalm 23, verse 4. Even though I walk through the valley of the shadow of death, I fear no evil. Why? You are with me. And the question is that still true for us as New Testament disciples of King Jesus? And when you get to the New Testament, what does God make absolutely clear? It's absolutely true that I'm with you every step of the way. I think about what Paul would say in Acts 17, verse 24. The God who made the world and everything in it, the Lord of heaven and earth, does not live in temples built with human hands. And he is not served by human hands if he needed anything. Rather, he himself gives everyone life and breath, everything else. From one man he made all nations, that they should inhabit the whole earth. He marked out their appointed time and history and the boundaries of their lands. God did this so that they would seek him, and perhaps reach out for him and find him, though he is not far from any of us. For in him we live and move and have our being. What does Paul make absolutely clear? He's not just a God above creation, a God holding the world in his hand. He's also a God near to his people, a God who is not hard to find because he is a God who walks alongside them. I think about the promise of Jesus, the clearest place we find this, Matthew chapter 28, verse 19. Therefore go and make disciples of all the nations, baptizing them in the name of the Father and the Son and the Holy Spirit, and teaching them to obey everything I command you. And surely I am with you always, even to the end of the age. What is a better image of God? It's not one where he is just ruling, but one also where he is walking alongside. Not one where he is just sustaining the world, but he is also sustaining me. Not one where he is just fixing the problems of the world, but he's also holding the hand of his child along the way, helping them. This is the God of the Bible. Man, oh man, when I think about these 4 points, it gives me a little bit of goosebumps, doesn't it, for you? To think about who our God is and the beauty of who he is. A God who is, dare I say, a lot about me, focused on me, attentive to me, protecting me, walking alongside me, church family. Yes, there is a side of God that we need to appreciate, the majesty, the glory, the dominion, the power, but also there is another side to him that we need to equally appreciate, the nearness, the closeness, the attentiveness of our God every step of the way. And like I said, we need to appreciate it, not just because we should just appreciate who God is and just with clarity, with biblical accuracy, but also because, as I said, when our views are imbalanced, when we negate one or the other and we've missed some things about God, it's going to lead to a whole lot of consequences. We've alluded to that over and over again, haven't we? But can I just say this? For those who walked in with a narrow view of God this morning, here's what I hope happens for you. As you think about these things, is that image that you started out with at the beginning of this lesson has some more nuance painted to it. Can I say this to you this morning? I think what a better image is going to do for you today, even though I'm not going to give you some applicational points, here's what I bet's going to happen in your life if you buy into the sermon today. You're going to be more holy. You're going to be more holy. When you appreciate who God is, when you see him in his complete nature to the best of our abilities, we are going to be more holy, aren't we? I love the children's song, "Oh, be careful, little hands, what you do, for the Father up above is looking down in love." Church family, what is one of the best motivating factors not to sin ever? It is to appreciate and realize there is a God watching you every second, every single day. When our image shifts of God to a king a million miles away from a more accurate picture, what we will find is that we are probably not living the lives that we should. But when our view and image of him shifts to what it should be, we'll realize that secret sins, well, that's actually a term that doesn't exist in the eyes of God because the Lord is near. But I also think going along with this point of holiness, we're also going to be more holy when we appreciate God's nearness and his closeness and his attentiveness, his love for me as an individual. Because that's also just a great motivating factor, isn't it? Like, who's the boss that you serve more heartily in the office? Who is the boss that you are more likely to work hard for? Is it the boss that you've deemed just as this ruler figure who's maybe harsh, who's judgmental, who's just focused on the big picture in the company? Or is it the boss that loves you and brings you that cup of coffee, who knows you by name, who sees you, who cares for you, who knows what's going on in your day and in your week, who is the boss you work more hard for? What I've found in my life, it's the second one, 10 times out of 10. Why? Because love and recognizing love in someone is a great motivating factor for work, devotion, for submission. But can I also say this in closing, that when we have a better image of God, it's going to lead to more peace in our life. And this is what I just realized that the world just needs more of. Christians need more of right now. And again, I can't help but just wonder how much of this lack of peace can be attributed to a lack of a clear image of who God is. How can we not be moved to peace when our view of God is expanded? An image of God on His throne holding the universe together should give us peace. It should. But how much more peace can we find in seeing a more complete image, a wonderful image? The image of God having an intimate concern for me, knowing me by name in heaven, always listening to what I say. We'll find greater peace when we appreciate that, won't we? Like those in the fiery furnace of Daniel, we will see a Creator who's standing beside us, even though we can't see Him tangibly. Church family, seeing a better image of God, the case that I'm going to make to you here today, seeing a better image of God leads to a better walk in this world. A walk where we are more faithful to Him, where we are avoiding the temptations of the devil, but also a walk that we can find that peace that surpasses all understanding. Church family, like I said, I don't know if this is going to be the most memorable lesson that I'll ever preach, but I think it's one that we need to preach on more, on both sides of the pendulum, so that we all see God for who He is. Because when we see God correctly to the best of our abilities in our finite minds, church family, it changes everything about the here and now. We want to offer an invitation at the end of this lesson to anyone who might not yet be a child of God. This is the God of the Bible. A God who will hold you accountable for your sins. A God who rules above creation. A God who we should serve because He is the Creator. But also, He's a God who loves you. Who wants you. Who sent His Son Jesus to die for you. This morning I pray that you see that and recognize that if you are not a child of God, to see the intimate love, concern that the Father has for you. And I pray that just pierces your heart, that moves you to action to respond to that love. Again, love is an amazing motivating factor, isn't it? If you are subject to that invitation, if you want to be baptized today, come forward right now as we stand and as we sing.